Hello BookTube, my name is Nick, and I'm deciding to make a Poetry Thursday video on one of John Keats' poems, and one of my favorite poems by him, To Autumn. I was inspired by this because I saw Steve Donahue's finally making Poetry Thursday videos, and I saw in the link to one of his videos, in the description to one of his videos, he had a link to another booktuber's channel named, I think it's Aaron Farser, and he did his Poetry Thursday video on John Keats, and he read Ode to Psyche, and I thought, well, why not I make a video about one of my favorite odes? And so here we go. To Autumn by John Keats. To Autumn. Season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruit the vines that round the thatch eaves run, to bend with apples the mossed cottage trees, and fill all fruit with ripeness to the core, to swell the gourd, and plump the hazel shells with a sweet kernel, to set budding more, and still more, later flowers for the bees, until they think warm days will never cease, for summer has overbrimmed their clammy cells. Who hath not seen thee oft amid thy store? Sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on a greenery floor, thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind, or on a half-reaped furrow sound asleep, drowsed with the fume of poppies, while thy hook spares the next swath and all its twined flowers. And sometimes like a gleaner thou dost keep steady thy laden head across a brook, or by a cider press, with patient look. Thou watchest the last oozings hours by hours. Where are the songs of spring? Ay, where are they? Think not of them. Thou hast thy music too. While barred clouds bloom the soft dying day, and touch the stubble plains with rosy hue, then in a wailful choir the small gnats mourn among the river sallows, borne aloft or sinking as the light wind lives or dies. And full-grown lambs loud bleat from hilly bourne, hedge crickets sing, and now with treble soft the redbreast whistles from a garden croft, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies. So the theme, I think the main theme of this poem is this prolonged abundance. Things just seem to be going, there's so much of everything, the fruits, the vegetables around you, like a cornucopia. There's just more and more, and there's so much that you just think this is how it's always going to be. So that comes in, that idea of just this prolonged abundance is here. In the first stanza, there's to set budding more, and still more, later flowers for the bees, until they think warm days will never cease, for summer has overbrimmed their clammy cells, right? Just think of like their cells are just overbrimmed. It's like a cup of a glass of beer that's overflowing with foam. You have these little cells, and they're oozing, they're completely overflowing with honey. Here's another example. And sometimes in the second stanza, and sometimes like a gleaner thou dost keep steady thy laden head across a brook, or by a cider press with patient look, thou watchest the last oozings hours by hours. There, watchest the last oozings. This isn't the beginning of we're still, it's going on. This is not the middle, we're at the very end, and still it seems like we're waiting, when is it going to end? No, goes on for hours and hours, and I imagine when I hear this and I listen, I think of, at first I have the vision of trees with those like little metal spokes inside, and slowly the sap or the cider comes out and hits the pail that's hanging underneath, and I think of the tap, tap, tap of the bottom of the pail, and thinking of like when someone leaves the faucet on, it's kind of like just telling the time that's slowly passing. And let's see, yeah, and so, and that prolongingness is also weaved into it by the stanza structure. So you've got 11 lines, and the ninth and the 10th line ends in a couplet. And when you read that, you kind of, and still more later flowers for the bees, until they think warm days will never cease. And you think, okay, that's done, and you kind of feel like there should be a pause. But it still goes. We're still in the stanza. For summer has over brim that clammy cells. We got to keep going, because it reminds me of like at the end of some of the scenes or acts in some of the scenes in Shakespeare, when the character has a couplet and it kind of has a great way of just like ending the scene and like, okay, on to the next, and there's a pause. It's a natural, comfortable pause, and I think in that pause I imagine the curtains going across and they're changing the scenery of the play during that time. There's a couple examples of when, in this poem, when the sound of the words line up and match the meaning of what's being expressed. So it kind of like brings you that much closer to envisioning what's happening. So for example, when I hear where is it? Well, before that, we can just talk about real quick just some of the great adjectives. I mean, he was always great at picking like the to swell the gourd. And you think of how gourds are already swelled. You have the skinny top and then a wider base, and you kind of think of that. It's like what other perfect way of then how it's already naturally a swelled, kind of like a pear a little bit, just a swelled shape. And plump they hazel shells, think with a sweet kernel. I mean, you just like plump. I mean, I just think cherries or peaches or plums, and plump the hazel shell, and you think of like it's kind of like the shell is almost bursting with the kernel that's inside. For summer has overbrimmed their clammy cells. I love clammy. I'm thinking like because it is autumn, and so it's still cold outside, and clammy cells. I'm thinking clammy, like something on some kind of liquid dripping on the sides of it. And I bet you if you took a real close look at honeycomb, it probably looked like an assortment of little caves. And so I think of kind of like how how water runs off the side of a cave. I'm thinking of how the honey runs off the side of the cell. Where else? Well, anyway, so now we can talk about what I had mentioned before, when the sound of the word matches the sentiment or the meaning behind it. I think one example is right here. Thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind. I think you have two examples in that line. Thy hair soft lifted. If you say soft lifted, you hear that? And it matches soft lifted. Kind of just a gentle soft lifted. Just a sign of the soft. I think it's it's just how we pronounce and how the little natural music in the words and the length of the vowels. It's just natural. And then by the winnowing wind, I mean that double by the winnowing wind, that double W-I sound is kind of like by the winnowing wind. Kind of how like the wind blowing in your ears, blowing past your ears. Or by a cider press with patient look, thou watchest the last oozings, hours by hours. That repeated hours by hours, that hours by hours. The repeated sound, and it matches the last oozings of it hitting the bottom of the pail. Where are the songs of spring? I like that, the songs of spring. We're not the sounds of spring. The music it's the songs of spring. We think of all the creatures that, particularly birds and little insects, who play the repeated music or different various sound that are just natural. When we think of spring, they just come into our ears. Or like if you just walk, you feel spring has arrived when you hear this. And and here's also here's another example. Among the river sallows, borne aloft, or sinking as the light wind lives or dies. So you have that borne aloft, you're bringing your back up, borne aloft, or sinking. It goes off to the next line, borne aloft or sinking as the light wind lives or dies. And in this line, or sinking as the light wind lives or dies, if you figure out where the caesura, the break in the line, or sinking, if it's if you read Walter Jackson Bates's biography on John Keats, he talks about this Miltonic and John Milton technique. If you want to put emphasis on the last word on the line, you put the caesura, the break of the line, after the sixth syllable, and so, or sinking as the light wind lives or dies, or die. I mean, the fact that it has that finality, that emphasis on dies, matches, dies, it's final, And then in full-grown lambs, loud bleat from hilly bourne. The loud bleat there is a trochee. It's when two stressed syllables are next to each other. And full-grown lambs, loud bleat from hilly bourne. Loud bleat puts that emphasis. It sticks out in the line, and it matches loud bleat. It's a loud sound. It sticks out. Hedge crickets sing, and now with treble soft, the redbreast whistles from a garden croft. The redbreast whistles from a garden croft. Gathering swallows twitter in the skies. Well, I think let's move on to another thing I noticed when I read this. The third stanza. You can actually trace the path that John Keats is, either when he was walking on his path and he saw it in this way, but more likely while he was writing it, and the vision and his recollection of his path, that his walk he just came. But by the way, I mentioned that because this is one of the few points we actually know how he was inspired to write it. He just was writing to, first he went on a walk, came back, and he wrote a letter to his friend and said, I had walked by a river on this autumn night, and then I noticed that the fields, when the way the sun was hitting them, that the fields, although it's cold outside, it made them feel warm, and that comes up and touched the stubble plains with rosy hue. And he says, so I just decided to compose on it. He just wrote it. And here he writes the best. I wonder if he knew that this was his best poem. I wonder if he was aware. And I'm sure he realized, he was getting better and better, but did he know that this was his best poem? But there's no secret. I don't know. I always get this idea that the poets have some divine inspiration and they're just living on another world. But I think they were just thinking about art and about poetry a lot more deeply than regular people are, if they even think about it at all. And they were very attuned and aware and observed everything. They try to find every little, if not even just beauty or truth or just whatever's going on, because so many, we're surrounded by the same things over and over that it quickly becomes just habitual, and everything's passing our eye. But if we sit down, think, and stare and look at something, I think some of these things come up. We notice it. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. You can follow the path of Keats' his mind's eye when he was composing the poem in the third stanza. So, where are the songs of spring? Aye, where are they? Think none of them. Thou hast thy music too. So, first he's talking to autumn, or maybe he's answering himself. While barred clouds bloom the soft dying day. So now we're up in the sky. And think of that. Barred clouds bloom the soft dying day. I like to think, when I think of this, I think of what Wordsworth wrote in his Ode to Imitations, Recollections on Childhood. How he says, I don't memorize the exact lines, but the coloring of the clouds, they take on a sober coloring at the end of the day and sunset, and it makes you think of man's mortality, that slow, thinking about the finality of things, of death, of the end of days, the end of our life. It's a soft dying day. I mean, the colors aren't exploding in your face. It's kind of like a long, soft glow that's in the sky, and it's slowly fading as the sun goes back to its resting place. So while barred clouds bloom the soft dying day, and touch the stubble plains with rosy hue. I like the touching. We're not washing them, we're not staining them, we're not covering them or blanking them out. It's just touching. It's just a light, ever so. It's like it's the certain effect that you get when you see certain objects from a distance. They take on a slight discoloration. I think there might be a graying effect or like a gray bluish effect of things that are off in the distance, and it's the slightest, just a little touch, There's a little tint change. So we've gone from the clouds to the plains, and now that we're back on the plains, we're kind of closer to us, and now we're walking along that river path. Think of the trees around us. Then in a wailful choir, the small gnats mourn among the river sallows. They're mourning the soft dying day. It's as if they're also in tune with the poet's feelings among the river sallows. So now we're next to the river. We have that cloud of gnats around us. You've been on hiking trails. All of a sudden you see it in front of you and then it goes into your face, the little whizzings. Or you hear mosquitoes pass by your ears. Or sinking as the light wind lives or dies. And now we're focusing on our hearing, right? We've got the sound of the gnats, and then the wind might have blown the gnats away. And full-grown lambs loud bleat from hilly bourne. And now it's like our eyes are trying to chase the sounds. And now we're a little bit off into this, and not far away, but the hill, we see the lambs loud bleating. Hedge crickets sing. Now we're closer to the crickets that are probably coming up to us, or that we're noticing as we walk along the path. And now with treble soft, the redbreast whistles from a garden croft, and now our eyes are up, we're looking at the branches, or with from a garden croft, someone's garden, probably by that same cottage that was mentioned earlier in the poem. And then in gathering swallows twitter in the skies, and now you see that brush of swallows, 4 or 5 of them chasing each other, going off into the skies, and then you're looking at them, you try to follow them, but then they dive back into some bush or hedge or behind the trees, and they're gone. And it's kind of like, and gathering swallows, now we're back in the skies, and now we're back to those barred clouds blooming, right? And now they're probably losing that glow, and now we're shifting more and more into evening. So I'm sure there's just when I read it just now, certain things are popping out that I didn't pay attention to before, like the small gnats mourning, connecting that to soft. You've got to read these poems again and again, and I think closely, and like really just focus on what it's saying, and try to match up what's going on in the poem with sensations that you've experienced in your own life. And I don't blame you if you've never paid any particular attention to some of these things, but then if you do in your life, and then you can relive it in your mind and match it all together, and you can experience what the poet experienced, I think, at least, if you put the effort, imagination in it, and you can enjoy all these different details about autumn, all these beautiful details. So yeah, this video is running a lot longer than I thought, but I hope you enjoyed it. And leave comments if anyone watched this about a poem by Keats and what you want to do next. I'm probably going to do Ode to a Nightingale. That's another poem I'm familiar with, and I'll try to find all the little things about it that I like. And so yeah, that was my Poetry Thursday video. I hope you liked it. Thank you for watching.